Inflation for most people is causing them to use their credit cards to try and make up for income shortfalls. How big is this problem? In the second quarter of 2022, Americans added $46 billion to their credit card balances. Some of that could be you. The Federal Reserve Consumer Credit Report showed that the rate of interest on credit cards went from 14.56 to 16.65%. Those Americans struggling with credit card debt saw their delinquency rates escalate from 1.66% to 1.81%. The Cambridge Debt Consolidation Program may be able to help you reduce the interest rates by 2/3 and cut your time to pay off the debt from 30 years to as little as 5 years. If you're struggling and you want professional and objective help getting your credit house in order, then call 1-855-435-2066. It's time for Black and White, a show that wants to bring all of us together, talking again about the issues that concern us. It's time to hear from people who only want to deal with facts. It's time for you to re-engage in your right of American free speech. It's time for Black and White. Welcome back to Black and White, and joining us is a gentleman who I admire greatly in the work that he's done. And he was on our show a couple of weeks ago. His name is Jeffrey Prather. He's a retired military, as you'll see when his picture comes up. A gentleman of many talents and great service to our country, both in the military and outside. And he's the Chief Intelligence Officer for the AMP News.us network. Major, welcome back again.
Thanks for having me back.
So you can see that on there, on his collar there, you can see the airborne. And what's underneath?
Honduran wings, so often confused by Marines as Marine wings, but those are my foreign jump wings. Spent a lot of time in Honduras, and some of that was at Tamara, which is the Honduran jump school.
I've invited the Major to come back and talk about a couple of issues that he's quite knowledgeable about, and that is the selling of our children into slavery, sex slavery in the United States. And surprisingly enough, the United States is the largest trafficker in children. And then we want to talk about security in general. I'd like you to pick wherever you want to start, and let's just go and see what happens.
So I came out of St. Joseph's Orphanage, as we were saying before the show got started, and was adopted by a great Catholic Baptist couple. Ended up following my father into the military. He was a World War II veteran, was Army military intelligence, but I went straight into Special Operations Command. And because I spoke Spanish and I was in psychological operations, that deployed me with the Rangers and 7 Special Forces Group, which I later went over to, the Latin America group, which put me right with the Contras. And I saw firsthand the Ali North debacle that ensued when Reagan had the covert operation to fund the Contras through cocaine, through the Iran-Contra controversy. I really so I've seen covert operations go awry up close. And then I went over to the Drug Enforcement Administration. I was recruited there. And simultaneously, I was recruited into Defense Intelligence Agency. So I was dual credentialed as a DEA special agent and as a DIA intelligence collector. I was extraditing the first Sinaloa cartel leader when the DEA kind of started coming after me in 04 to 09, inadvertently discovered that the DEA was running drugs in exchange for the Fast and Furious guns going south. So I have direct experience with our government selling guns, selling drugs. And then so it wasn't much of a stretch for me to see that we are child selling and raping central, just like we are drug using central. And Ted Gunderson, the former FBI senior special agent, ran the LA division, discovered that the FBI had been running kids that was in the McMartin school, which actually had tunnels. It was archaeologically proven there had been tunnels, satanic pentagrams found, animal bones found there. People in the trial, the McMartin school personnel got off, but that was through legal trickery. So what I say is the deep state or double government, which is really the intelligence community, the puppet masters who run the puppets, such as Harris and Biden and Fetterman and the rest that can barely speak and function, are really part of the intelligence community, and they have a dark economy, and that dark economy is weapons, drugs, and people. And the darkest and most evil part of that is the selling and raping of children. The reason for that is twofold. Well, as a chaplain, I think the ultimate source of that is evil, is the adversaries, Satan, Satan, the demonic demi-fallen gods of greed, Baal, Bull, Wall Street Bull, Moloch, child sacrifice, and Ishtar, transgender. But then just like with Epstein Island, it becomes a easy way to blackmail, extort somebody to have them under control. So that was the whole purpose, really, of Epstein Island, besides the supernatural satanic purpose. It's a dual purpose as well. But because America is so drenched in drugs, and the population, 1/4 or 1/3 of the population is drugged, then the next thing that goes from being drugged, so your senses are blurred, and we are not a godly nation anymore, is the selling of people. And children can be raised and raped repeatedly and resold and raped for many years, and then could even become pimps in themselves. So this is the dark economy of the deep state and the ungodly satanic nation that we now find ourselves in. And I'm just trying to open the breach created by Sound of Freedom by Jim Caviezel, whom I spoke after at the first Freedom and Health, to expose that, because unless you're Hunter or Hillary, it's still not acceptable to rape children.
Right. So, Jeff, I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with a gentleman by the name of Tom Baker. Tom Baker is a 35-year FBI agent, career agent, as they call it. And the title of his book is The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. And you just mentioned about the West Coast, the FBI involvement. Why do you think, Jeff, that the letter agencies in our government have turned so evil?
Well, that's a great question, and I think I can explain that. And I'll just preface that by saying I graduated from the FBI Academy because at the time, the DEA basic agent course was inside the FBI Academy in 1990, because DEA and FBI were always alongside each other, where everybody else went to FLETC, the Ford Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. But it was always the FBI and the DEA were always going to be rolled into one. It never happened. And I'll also say that I'm friends with Ed Morales, who is the hero of the Miami FBI gunfight. And so I'm a firearms instructor. And if you're a gun guy or a firearms instructor, everybody knows the gunfight, because that's the development for the 10 millimeter and then the 40 caliber. And but Ed says he wouldn't even talk to the FBI today. But what happens when you're, whether you're in intelligence or law enforcement as a detective or special agent, is you have to have confidential human sources or confidential informants to get inside the organization. Going undercover, and I've known guys who've done that. I've known Jay Dobbins, who tatted himself up and went undercover with the Hells Angels. But for most big crime syndicates, you have to have somebody who was in it already, and usually you catch them and arrest them, and in exchange for leniency, they work off their beef with you. But a very high-level informant, such as I worked when I was extraditing Miguel Caro Quintero, brother of Rafael, who tortured and murdered our agent Kika Camarena, very high-level informant. They're real sophisticated, streetwise guys. And if you're not careful, they'll start running you, and they'll turn the tables on you. For example, I saw female FBI informant arrive with a FBI agent alone and leave with an FBI agent alone. I would never leave or arrive anywhere with an agent, with a informant alone, because she could easily claim something on me, and then all of a sudden she's turned the table. The FBI, for the most part, they are not the guys that they're made up to be in the movies and films. I've known FBI agents who never cuffed anybody. There were white collar guys. Back in the day, they were bank robber guys with Bonnie and Clyde, although 2 Texas Rangers actually got Bonnie and Clyde. Right. Then they went on to white crime. Then they went into counter drug. And then they went into counterterrorism. When they came into counterterrorism and counterintelligence, they elaborated on their foreign counterintelligence capability, which is kind of like Bridge of Spies. If you've seen Bridge of Spies, that's a very realistic portrayal of them, and they're not very good at it. And that portion was actually part of the CIA, like Peter Strzok never graduated from the FBI Academy. He was CIA. But anyway, they get turned around and then they get extorted and controlled by their informants. And this is what I think has happened. And you've seen this in many movies. You've seen this in LA Confidential, where they say, oh, this will ruin the department or this will ruin the FBI forever. What they're really saying is this will ruin their careers. And so instead of coming clean, they just build lie upon lie upon lie. And now what we have is the uniparty, the rhinos and the Democrats supporting the really executive branch. And in particular, in the executive branch, they're supporting the intelligence community, who really runs the show now. And that's what happened with the Contras cash and cocaine scandal that I was part of back in the day, is when it was illegal to fund the Contras, Ollie North started running his op, and they started running cocaine into black neighborhoods and crack. And then they had this dark money and black money off the books where they could do whatever they want. And when JFK was going to come in, he was going to shatter the CIA into a million pieces, his quote. And so they wanted to maintain themselves. And so by getting extortion material, which J. Edgar Hoover did all the time on everybody, and their own money sources, they can do whatever they want. But of course, if you don't have a strong moral, ethical foundation, then there's no real difference between you and the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they've really become. And they are so intertwined at this point that I would say just if we could, get rid of the FBI, get rid of the CIA completely. And the Congress is the Freedom Caucus is cutting $1 billion off their budget, which is a start. But that $1 billion buys all kinds of informants all over the place. People don't realize how many informants the intelligence community, particularly the FBI, has all over the place. They say they only do foreign intelligence information influence operations, but I can tell you they are doing domestic all over the place, and they are everywhere.
You know, we've got about a minute and a half here before we go to our break. Baker says that the FBI, he agrees with you, that a bunch of the letter communities probably need to be shut down. He said the FBI used to stand for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and now it's the Federal Bureau of Intimidation. Do you agree with that?
Oh, sir, sure. Yeah, I mean, and Indians have long said that as well. Yeah, I'd like to get Baker on my show and talk to him. I've had Ed on as well. But yeah, it's just a wreck at this point. And it's really a counterinsurgency. That is, the resistance movement against trannies and drag and everything else is being shut down by the FBI, going after PTA moms and veterans and citizens. And that's this whole white supremacy script that the FBI is now running, right along with election interference, because they know the Dems and the rhinos will continue to support them.
Yeah, that's an important issue. And we'll talk about that when we come back. The role of the FBI in affecting our political process, whether it's voting machines, ballots, or corruption of candidates. With that, so that you can be heard on ampnews.us. Did I get that right?
You got it right. That's AmericanMediaPeriscope.com, the Prather Brief, Mondays and Wednesdays.
Mondays and Wednesdays. And is it a podcast or is it a program show?
No, it's a program show. It's on it. It's recorded in the morning, but it's 5 p.m. I recorded my show this morning. It'll be on in an hour.
Okay, super. We'll be right back with the major. We are Americans, male and female, from many races and cultures from all over the world. One thing above all else is we are patriots who protect our nation and defend, when necessary, our Constitution from attacks both foreign and domestic. Today, as American patriots, we must take back our country from those who want to destroy it and us. We must start by taking back our children and their education. Parents, not union, should be in charge of our children's education. We must be sure that they are taught about the greatness of America and its people. Our children should not be indoctrinated with the belief that parents are racist and are evil and trying to destroy the world. As patriots, we must take back our country from foreign nations who want to destroy us and our way of life. Yes, as patriots, we want America to be first. We want an open and fair trade policy, energy independence, safe cities, and secure borders where we can grow and prosper as a nation of free people. Become an American patriot. Help take back America by voting Republican. We're back with our guest, who's very accomplished in all kinds of secret stuff, but he's going to talk to us today about what's going on in the trafficking of children and how bad it is. Jeffrey, welcome back again.
Thanks for having me back.
Let's talk about when I heard that number, that the United States, with a population of 331 million people, is the largest trafficker of children. Is that because of what's going on at the border, or are there other things going on?
Well, now that our republic is fallen, something I say all the time, and our institutions have been infiltrated, including, I say, the presidency and the attorney general's office. Now, really, the law enforcement agencies that used to protect the border, I worked a lot with Customs and Border Protection, a lot with BORTAC, Border Patrol Tactical Unit. They're really being forced now to traffic children. You see the borders are porous. The UN has a center in the Darien Gap in Panama. I've been there. And the ICE and CBP are transporting kids all across the country into closed Walmarts, into hotel rooms. And these are really becoming child brothels. There's no way to track all of these children. The DOJ has stopped doing DNA testing and verification. They're being told to destroy their documents. And so it's a fiction that they're going to link up with relatives. This is really to feed a terrible, evil addiction. And this ties into the drug community. This ties into the pornographic community. All of that is happening in America today. And it's a great tragedy for those of us who served our country in the military and law enforcement and intelligence, because these institutions now are totally corrupted.
Does the military have a role in this or not?
Well, they do, but our military is in Poland, the forward operational base for Ukraine, and our military is in Ukraine. There's lots of children going missing in Ukraine as well, and so that's part of the dark economy of weapons, drugs, and people. And the other part of that is the money flow. We saw that with Sam Bankman-Fried, who was running money into Ukraine and feeding it back to the Democratic Party. And if you remember his, you probably never saw his avatar on Twitter, but his avatar had a heart within a heart, which is a boy rape symbol. So this is all tied in together. All those three always go together. But the military is not doing anything on the border. It used to be JTF-6 would augment Border Patrol on the border. They've been shunted aside. And the transgenderism that has infected the troops has destroyed the morale and the military effectiveness. But really, to understand the kind of war, it's not really a kinetic kind of war anymore. It's a psychological operations war. It's a biodigital war with the bioweapons through the non-vax jabs and boosters with the 5G. So the military is complacent, if not conspirator in this, but certainly at the higher ranks they are.
Jeff, what I have a hard time understanding, and maybe you can bring some insight in it to me. What I don't understand, and we talked briefly about it in the first segment, how is it that 334 million people, with countries like China and India, which have 1.4 billion each, how did we become the world's capital in drug trafficking and children trafficking? What makes us so unique that we're that good at it?
Americans are very fat, lazy, and life is very easy here. The first thing I'd always notice when I came back from overseas is how fat everybody was, and so I make a lot of comparisons. So I'm a chaplain, so I study scripture, and I'm a historian. I study history, if you look at history, I think you can make a lot of comparisons between the fallen Roman Republic and the fallen American Republic, which is replaced by a corrupt Roman dictator and government, which has been replaced by a corrupt American dictator and government as well. And then what eventually happened, because the Romans were such great fighters and engineers, and so that our military was the greatest the world's ever seen. But it was a building military as well, technological military as well as the Roman military was as well. So that is I think the comparison is almost scary in that it's very much parallel. But eventually what happened with the Roman dictatorships was the Praetorian Guard controlled who became the next Caesar, who became the next emperor. And at one point, they even auctioned off the emperorship. And so I make a comparison that the FBI, the CIA, the intelligence community, the executive branch, military, intelligence, and law enforcement are the Praetorian Guard. And they're really controlling everything. So the FBI, the DOJ are kind of the counterinsurgency that keeps the whistleblowers, the PTA moms, the veterans in control, and the intelligence community, the CIA, the NSA are really controlling behind the scenes. And the dark economy that flows overseas is enabled because of diplomatic immunity. So diplomatic pouches where, Americans have to work at their businesses. The engine of the economy of America was the small businessman, the entrepreneur, the innovator, but they don't have to do that. They can, with their badges and credentials, they can just go overseas. They can bring in guns, they can bring in drugs, they can bring in anything. And that's what they have really relied upon. But their corruption makes them very incompetent. And so all of that system is starting to collapse, just as the Roman government collapsed.
If you take a look at, for example, the FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop before the 2020 election. And they put out stories that, in fact, it was Russian interference. So they lied to the American people about the source of the information and the accuracy of it in order to give a better possibility of having Joe Biden win the election. But look how long it's taken after the election to admit that everything on the Hunter laptop was in fact true. I mean, how many times can you lie to the American people and continue to get away from it? Or will they turn and do something else?
Well, that's the important thing about your show and my show and American Media Periscope and Brighteon TV is to wake everybody up, because really, what I say is the FBI doesn't solve crimes, it manages crimes. The CIA doesn't collect intelligence, collects people. And so they're controlling the narrative. That's an information influence operation. That's a PSYOP. And so the FBI says we're the greatest law enforcement organization ever. They're not law enforcement. They're intelligence with a law enforcement capability, and they are certainly not the best. And anybody on the inside knows that. But they perpetuate this image so they can do what they do, because there's the Citizen Academy. All the local police chiefs go there to the National Academy to get trained. And so the laptop is a perfect example of information influence operations domestically, not overseas. And they are doing that to perpetuate themselves like the Praetorian Guard so that they are not eliminated because, Trump was trying to reform things. JFK was trying to reform things. So they want to perpetuate themselves. That's the whole point of all this. And that's how they get away with it. So there's cover and concealment in the military. Cover is ballistic protection. Concealment is you're just hidden. And their cover is really their concealment. So the more we reveal them and expose them and stop working with them at all levels, the more we can begin to end this. That's why Sound of Freedom is so important. That's why what American Media Periscope supporting Operation Underground Railroad is so important. And we need to stop participating in this corrupt system and build parallel economies and parallel systems. So what I say is that means homeschool, home church, home work don't have anything to do with them.
The situation is that we have the FBI, according to stuff that I'm seeing in terms of American surveys, no longer trust the FBI or the CIA or the Justice Department. They don't trust anybody anymore. I wonder how long that can go with the American people not trusting the police organizations and the security operations of the federal government.
Yeah, that's crucial, because you've got to have confidential human sources, and as those dry up, so will they as well. And so we see that happening with ESG in Europe. Environmental social governance is collapsing. We see China starting to collapse. Within a century, China will collapse as well. So this is who's paying off the Biden regime, because the Biden regime is for sale from whomever. They are totally infiltrated via the China. It's the unrestricted warfare program and the 1,000 Talents program. Via the World Economic Forum, it's environmental social governance. But both of those are beginning to fail. So is ChatGPT, the AI is starting to fail. So just like the Roman Republic failed and the barbarians come in, that's what we see happening here as well. And the sooner that happens, the better. But it was
going to be who are going to be the barbarians that are going to ride in for us?
Well, you're seeing them come across the border all the time. And in the bigger cities, you see all kinds of constant attacks happening on citizens, murders. So that's exactly the same kind of thing happening. And that's really to take that territory. So there's a SOCOM term for feral city, and that means the city's not controlled by the government. The police aren't controlling it. It's controlled by the insurgency. So that's the insurgency coming in. Antifa.com still goes to whitehouse.gov today. The Trantifa movement, though, where they're trying to take our children because they self-extinguish themselves and they don't produce enough, that's where it stopped. Across the country, police departments have been shooting Antifa and Trantifa folks who stand up, and they still are doing that today. So going from the covert war to the overt war has been difficult, but it's an array of enemies, from the nation state of China to the non-nation conglomerate of the World Economic Forum to the corporate cartels of Pfizer and AstraZeneca, besides the Sinaloa cartel, which I fought.
So do you think that there's any hope for our country?
I'm always hope-filled. I'm always faith-filled. Again, I'm a Christian chaplain, and so I'm following Revelation. And with the activation of Israel as a state in the day at the end of World War II, we're not doing Bible study history anymore. We're watching Scripture unfold in real time. That's very different. And then the other part of that is, if you look at the history of nations, if you read, for example, Sir John Glubb's The Fate of Empires, they all last about 250 to 275 years before con men come in and figure out how to game the system and just pillage it and plunder it. And we are there.
Yes, we are. Well, unfortunately, Jeff, we have run out of time. Tell us again how people can follow you.
The Prather Brief is on AmericanMediaPeriscope.com, ampnews.us, Mondays and Wednesdays. And then I'm also the Prather Point on Tuesdays and Thursdays at JeffreyPrather.com. That's where all my books are, videos, all my training resources as well.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us today. And we'd like to hear your comments or questions. So go to bwradionetwork.com. That's bwradionetwork.com and give us your questions or comments. And thanks for joining us today.